Yeah, work-life balance, you probably ask 100 people, you're gonna get 100 definitions of that.
Mhm.
One of my favorite questions to ask my candidates is, what was your biggest failure?
When I was in recruitment, 9 years ago, it was a bit more about hard skill sets, which are the 5 years, a degree. And that seemed to be more cared about then. And now it's kind of shifted to like who you are as a person. How much do you care about XYZ? And are you curious and
'Cause
passionate?
I felt like in years past, I kind of almost expected what the next few years were gonna be like, but with AI and ChatGPT and how those will continue to evolve, I think it's gonna be a fun next few years.
I'm really hoping for a 4-day work week. Hey everyone, it's Kailyn, your host today on Career Kickstart Conversations. Today we have a really interesting topic. We're talking broadly about the past, the now, and the future of the workplace. So, if you're listening, you're job seeking, looking for career advice, I think today you'll get a lot of information of just where the market's at, where it was, and where it's headed, and maybe how you can stand out, maybe how you're currently not standing out, and what to really prepare for. Obviously, the future is going to be our opinions. We are not psychics, but we have a great guest here today that's super knowledgeable in all these spaces. His name is Kevin. He currently works at Weatherby, but I will let him introduce himself and then we'll get started into the question and topics.
Yeah, thanks, Kailyn. No, definitely excited to spend the next 30 minutes or so with you. Yeah, a little bit about myself. I'm a director with Weatherby Healthcare. Weatherby Healthcare, we do locum tenens staffing. So it's physician temporary staffing all across the country. I've been with Weatherby approaching 9 years here this August, but healthcare staffing has been my primary background. Probably got about 15 plus years. Started off as a recruiter, was in the trenches, or what most staffing agencies would call the pitch. So worked
Yeah.
my way up through many verticals, and healthcare has really been something that's been part of my life. Love seeing patients being impacted by the services that my team, myself, have been able to help them out with. So yeah, and personally, yeah, I've been married for goodness, coming up on 20 years. Can't
Oh,
believe my wife's not been married for 20 years. We've got two beautiful daughters.
congrats.
Thank you. And so yeah, it's a lot of hard work there, but no, we're excited. We got a big trip planned this year for us. And then we've got two daughters, 11 and 9, and they keep us busy. Both are very active in their competing sports, swimming and soccer, really outside of work. And maybe the little things I do myself keeps me pretty busy. But glad that none of that's happening for this time to talk with you.
Yeah, great. Gosh, you are busy. I mean, just being in staffing is busy. So I can
Oh yeah,
imagine having a family
nonstop.
to it right now. Cool. Well, you're in a super interesting industry, especially as it pertains to where we were at before. So when we're just for the audience, when we're talking about the past, we're kind of going like 5 to 7 years. We're not talking 50 years ago or anything like that. Obviously, as everyone knows, COVID was a big factor, and just so the audience is aware of kind of where we're the the timeline of this discussion today is our goal is to do like the first 10 minutes or less, really the past. Not don't want to dive in too much there. Really want to focus on like the now and the future, but we'll start with the past. Um, so how, and this is all about culture in the workplace, guys. So Kevin, how was the culture in the workplace? How would you describe it 5 to 7 years ago? And obviously there may be that big difference before and after COVID, but what was it? What was it like? And we'll start there.
Yeah, when you say 5 to 7 years ago, I forget that it's been that long because
I
it
know.
really does feel like it was just not too long ago, probably maybe within the last year. But that culture, I think about it, that Monday through Friday being in office 10, 12 hours a day and still managing and accomplishing the things that not only for work, but then for my personal life, it's still hard to believe that that was who I was and who what the culture was for a long period of time. And there were some blessings what that took place with COVID, and that has led to where we're at right now. I think what we realize is that flexibility, people really investing into themselves was really important, and being able to, where our organization, I think they were very quick to recognize and kind of take some of that anxiety away. Um, that's just been who our organization has been, is looking out after the employee and what's going to work best for the employee, for them to be at their best self, and for them not to worry about having to show up just for the sake of showing up. That if we're going to show up, well, let's make sure we're adding value that is really going to create some type of positive experience. But for the time being, let's figure it out. So we went to a fully remote phase for quite a bit. But what's always been our foundation, and it's not just with our organization, but I think us as people, that connection, the really physically seeing somebody, getting that energy, the vibration that you have with a high performing team, or when things fall apart, what that mood feels like. There's a lot to be said when you're sharing that physically with one another. And there's a lot of tweaks that were made. We started off with a 1 day in the office, and then to where we're at today, it's a 2 day in the office. Tuesdays and Thursdays tends to be the most, I'd say, high attendance days in our organization. And I think that's talking with a lot of my peers that are in the staffing vertical, not necessarily healthcare. It's very similar to where, yeah, it does create a lot of balance that I know that, people that have been in the industry for a long period of time probably recognize that we weren't doing necessarily the best job with it. And it's still probably not defined. Yeah. Work-life balance, you probably ask 100 people, you're going to get 100 definitions of that.
Mhm.
But I believe we've probably found that sweet spot of what makes sense for the business, obviously for the individual, so people can show up and be in their best.
Okay. And so that's like internally at Weatherby. So you mentioned you went fully remote. I'm assuming that's when COVID hit. Your
Yes.
company
Yes.
drastically went, like most of other company, all of my clients did the same thing, unless they got the, what was it called back then? Oh, what is the word? Businesses that were necessary were able to stay open and have employees come on site and keep functioning. So, like
Essential.
healthcare, obviously, like nurses could still come to work, whereas other places had to get like test or this or vaccination requirements. So, um, oh my God, why am I blanking on that?
I was
Necessary.
thinking essential.
Essential, yes,
All
essential
right.
life-saving so yes, so back then, okay, so you had the COVID, you were on site working long hour days, then you went remote. What about your clients in healthcare? What did they experience around that COVID? What was that culture like right before and then during COVID?
Yeah, so being in the healthcare side of the staffing business, we got to see it firsthand on how it impacted the facilities. I mean, all across the country, facilities had completely shut down, and 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 seeing a lot of the reports that were actually happening in the news firsthand was an experience in itself, because we were living right through it, where, for example, how our business can be impacted. Obviously, if the hospitals are closed and shut down, then they're not bringing in new employees. They're not bringing in, obviously, patients. And so everybody's at a standstill. And that doesn't necessarily work for our population. People need care. People need treatment every minute, every day of the week. And when that comes to a stop, there becomes a backlog of then services that needed to actually be serviced. And the longer that patient cannot be seen, whatever maybe that initial pain or diagnosis they were going to get could have actually increased and severe. So now where it was going to be maybe just a checkup. By the time some of those patients have actually come in, now it's actually a much larger diagnosis. So we got to see how it impacted patients, where maybe something could have been addressed early on, to maybe prevent to where their current stage is at. So we got to see how that impacted not only the patients, but then for the physicians. With our business, locum tenens, our physicians are traveling all across the country. So it's really something special and cool to see when we're speaking with the doctor in Florida, and they maybe have connections in Bozeman, Montana, and they're flying out there 3 weeks out of the 4 weeks a month. But then that stops, and that doctor has developed a relationship in that hospital, in that community, and that doctor can't go. So there were some major impacts on patients, on the physicians, specifically when it came to locum tenens, because they were at home ready to go, but they weren't able to go. So once the doors and once the pandemic actually started to open up a little bit, to figure out how can we continue to provide care, it was just like the floodgates opening. And so we're still dealing with that in some of our specialty teams where patients continue to be backlogged and not be able to get in the timely fashion that they like, let alone that the hospitals would like. So there's in certain areas there's a high demand of certain physicians still, but in some other places it's definitely leveled out.
Okay. Okay. So that brings us, yeah, to the now. So are you seeing that just recently it's starting to stabilize with certain types of doctors, or and do you think that's because of COVID, or because I'm not familiar with the healthcare
Yeah,
industry, is it always kind of volatile or
it just depends. I think COVID was a good example. So the specialty team that I oversee, our pulmonary and critical care team, they were the hottest commodity. They were the hottest specialty team, meaning that the hospital systems needed these pulmonologists immediately. So while maybe your oncologist or your gastroenterologist or your anesthesiologist, because surgeries were delayed, weren't needed for that time period, every facility focused on pulmonology. So there was just a huge increase in demand. And to current day, since COVID is somewhat stabilized, that demand has actually reduced some. But when you talk about like specialties like medical oncology, where that unfortunate diagnosis continues to increase, so it really obviously depends on what's happening in the world. And in this case here, as more people continue to get diagnosed, not as many physicians becoming fellows, let alone becoming board certified oncologists. They had the reverse situation where the supply of oncologists is very low, but the demand is very high. So it really just depends on I guess the state of the world and what's actually taking place on what specialty teams are going to be impacted. But as far as for us as an organization, we're always, as you can see, it's always going to depend on what's going on, but we're always growing in some specialty, if
Mhm,
not in most. And the demand for talented individuals, people that actually truly care about making connection. This is a sales type environment that I'm currently in and the team that I lead. So it's a very, very fast environment, very high performing, exciting,
mhm,
because you're kind of partnering with these, not kind of, you are these physicians business partner throughout hopefully the duration of their entire career. And when
mhm.
things like this happen, when the market spikes, you're that person that they're going to call. When the market decides to retract some, you're that confidant. Hey, Kevin, what can we do now that I'm not getting as much as work as I was before? So it's a really neat relationship. And as far as the team and the consultants I oversee, it's a fun, exciting environment to be part of, even with those things actually happening in the world.
Okay. And you mentioned demand a couple times, and I see it in my industry too. I'm basically, just for the audience, I'm everything like but healthcare to just simplify it real quick. So supply and demand really affects us too, and that was a really big thing post COVID. And and what I saw, just to share a little bit, like my clients, the businesses, COVID hit, they basically fired everyone. And then they realized that they fired way too many people. So then everyone was hiring at the same time. So that supply and demand was really, it put the ball in the players, which I say the players, either the employer or the employee. The ball was going back and forth. Everyone got let go. Everyone was begging for a job. So their salaries were low. And then when these businesses are like, oh, I fired way too many people, I want to hire everyone back. Now everyone's getting blown up by recruiters, and now the supply, or I'm getting that mixed up. But anyway, now they're in high demand. Yeah. So now their salaries are higher. Did you see a difference in salary for what you were saying, those doctors who were in that high demand? Do you see their salaries changing? Again, I don't know much about healthcare, but does that change the salaries?
Yes, and Poland in our case, in our specialty, our physicians did see a very significant, quick increase as it came to compensation. And yeah, I mean, just it works with supply and demand. And now, as the demand has definitely reduced, um, the opportunities for a lot of the pulmonologists, critical care physicians are not as plenty. And so the leverage as far as compensation is not as high as it was then. You're seeing pulmonologists taking maybe um, 5-10% of a pay cut so that they can get into a location that fits and aligns with their goals. And they
Mhm.
understand. And so that's been a lot of on us doing a lot of the education, because nobody likes to pay decrease, no matter what the case is.
Yes.
So educating and working with physicians and informing them on how this is actually going to go and why has been the biggest thing. And yeah, and then some other cases where the demand for those physicians, there's been significant increase year over year. And there's a lot of data that shows which specific specialties um, are seeing those consistent increases year over year. It's a trickle effect where what what the market's demanding is they're definitely going to pay for it. The
Yeah.
physicians can benefit from it because they definitely know their value and they're definitely much needed out there, and rightfully so.
Mhm. So you mentioned the resources. Can you share what those resources are if you have them at the top of your mind where someone can go, especially in healthcare, to see how in demand is this job? Obviously, this would probably be for people looking to get maybe younger, looking to get into healthcare and maybe looking at the future. And obviously, it shifts on the need, like you said. But are there any good resources or tips you can give someone to be like understanding the demand of something that they want to go into?
So I subscribe to Becker's Hospital, and there I get daily and weekly communication. When you subscribe to it, they probably give you a, a list of about 50 boxes to check that you would like to view, and every year I update as far as the information that I want to see. This year, actually, I did it not too long ago because I wanted to read and hear more on AI and tech, on how that's going to impact our industry, really how it's going to impact the sales performance side, on the fulfillment side. How can my consultants and myself become more adaptable to what the hospital systems, our clients, and really how can we be better stewards for our physicians? But
Mhm.
Becker's Hospital, I'd say that's a good one because then it also gives you information on potential opportunities. So I'll tell you, LinkedIn has been underrated for me. I get a lot of good stuff, not only the industry updates, but a lot of talented consultants that I have working for my team have come from LinkedIn. But LinkedIn is also another good resource to get that type of information.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't even in our industries don't realize how much supply and demand matter when it comes to compensation and leverage and getting an opportunity. Like people are like, oh, well, I made 80K last year. It's like, yeah, well, everyone was dying for recruiters that year. Good luck getting 60 or whatever. Obviously that's not the way we talk, but just to
Well,
simplify it short, like this is just how it is. It's gonna be short lived because of what just happened. So just be kind of aware what's going talking to the audience, be aware of like what's going on in the world, use those resources, especially if you're in healthcare. It will help you kind of understand like where you're at and if the ball's in your court or the employers and whatnot. So, with all that in the past that's happened, we've talked a bit about how your company has adapted. It seems like you guys are on a hybrid role or before you were fully on site. I've seen that a lot with other companies too. They're adapting to that because people didn't want to go back into the office. What other things are you seeing now in terms of how maybe employers adapted outside of hybrid? It seems like you said employees first. What are some of those employee first things that maybe Weatherby's doing or your customers are?
yeah, I'll speak to what our organization does. I mean, the one thing that's been very consistent since I've been with the organization is the investment into the people. We're really good at in picking up consistent information from the surveys, our employee surveys, to listening to what is it that the organization wants, and how can we continue to make our people happier, make their lives much easier so that they can come in and show up and be their best self, but then also attract new talent into the organization. Is, the things that we're talking about, it's all about growth and adapting. And we continue to need more consultants and team members that can actually make an impact. And so we want to continue to lead the way when it comes to investing. So how, what are we doing investing? I can think of something specifically for myself. The 401k, huge. I know that's, some of those things that people are what's important to some individuals, but for me, it's what does life after work look like for me? And they have positioned myself and my family in such a good way. The benefits when it comes to the 401k, having a financial advisor that can really sit down with you and talk with you as far as, okay, this is what you're doing, this is what you're bringing in, everything. Even to where people are trying to that struggle, unfortunately, to have families, where a lot of the medication and services, when you probably go into competing agencies or organizations where they don't offer that, where we have that type of medication, those type of procedures that can assist, because we know that those things are very expensive. That was on a survey years ago, the very consistent comment made by a lot of people. And for our CEO and for our benefits team to make that type of switch, which is a huge one. Those are
Yeah.
some of the things that stick out to me where it's like, wow, you don't necessarily hear that. It's not necessarily a standard benefit when you go into an organization. So just as much as they invest and pour into us, you and I talked before we hop on the call. You caught me at a great week. It's our putting people first week with our organization. So it's a lot of giving back to the people and a lot of the hard work. So we're doing lots of fun games virtually and in office. And throughout the year, we have multiple things that go on. So what I love about it is, hey, the organization truly does care. They are willing to actually write the checks to do so, to invest. And so there's that obligation, responsibility that we have as an individual. And yeah, there's no reason why we can't show up and be our best self. We're all human. We'll have our bad days, but we'll all find a way to work together to achieve that common goal. And it's been one of the reasons why I've been here in about another 2 months for 9 years.
Mhm.
It's very much different. People that have worked in staffing, I think we all kind of have somewhat of a similar background and we've seen a lot of the same things, but I'd say Weatherby's done a good job to where there has been fine print that they've been able to live up to that.
That's great. Yeah. I've seen people kind of, obviously not to always that extent, but it seems since COVID, people started really voicing what they wanted and whether the company gets it through like employee surveys or just interviewing, exit interviews. Unfortunately, some
Yeah.
companies are reactive and they're getting it from at the exit, whereas it's good to hear that Weatherby's doing it proactively. What can we do for you now? Now, what can we do for you who's already gone? We can't do anything for you now. So I
Yeah.
always find the exit interviews helpful, but it's like the employee surveys while your employees are there, keep the retention, keep them happy. And that's who you want to put first. They're the ones working for you. So that's exciting about Weatherby. Um, so the future, obviously there's so many topics, and for the audience, we have podcasts about certain topics, AI, D&I, mental health, all these things. So we talked about where we were and where we're at now, especially when it comes to Weatherby, which I can attest a lot of customers are in that kind of realm. But well, before we go to the future, sorry, how does someone stand out now? So when they're applying for Weatherby, interviewing, or maybe it's one of your positions, what makes them stand out, especially maybe in those moments where the demand isn't so high for the position?
Yeah. So I'll discuss, if you don't mind, just the two positions as far as I understand now. So if someone's coming on board to be a Weatherby consultant, and actually a great question because we're in the midst of where we need some associate recruiters, we need some consultants, and how can they stand out? So with our associate recruiter position that we have open at this point, um, they typically don't come with much sales experience, so they're not going to have much to really discuss when it comes to metrics and maybe some experiences that are relatable to the actual position. But what we're looking for, people that are adaptable. Love to hear experiences in life. It could be from school, somewhere personally. What are some of those stories that they have and they can articulate in a well manner way that how do they overcome it? And not only how did they overcome it, but what was the biggest learning lesson? One of my favorite questions to ask my candidates is, what was your biggest failure? Because I love to hear what exactly, when they're honest about what that failure was and what did they learn from it. So I get to hear the process, the analytical thinking that they went through to one, figure out that, yeah, I didn't necessarily do a good job, but here's how I overcame it. And here's a lesson I learned that I've now applied. So somebody that's adaptable. Curiosity is a big one. And when it comes to relationships, new and even existing, there's a lot of questions that are going to be asked. So somebody that can come in and have some good questions. I always like to be taken back by a question. I tend to find that the people that I'm sitting across with that has that question to ask that I haven't heard in a while or at all tends to be a very high performing individual when they come on board, just because they're just so curious. They want to know more. They genuinely
Yeah.
care. And something that I just read here not too long ago, but I was reading an article by Gary Vaynerchuk, if you haven't heard him, talk about a little bit of the future, but the influence, the ability to influence, like the social influence. And it made a little sense to me, actually a lot of sense when we're speaking to physicians and we're engaging with them. A lot of times, if not all of the times, we're influencing them on their decision, their path, the goal maybe that they have actually created without our involvement. And when we come in and we get to understand that, and then we get to bring some market information to them that may help them get to that goal much sooner, being able to influence physicians in that way. So adaptability, curiosity, and influence, I think are the three things that stick out to me when somebody's coming on board and
Mhm.
applying for Weatherby that I'd like to see. Um, with little to no experience. And then for experienced consultants, when they come on, again, somebody that can speak to a lot of the obstacles that they came within the industry. What were the ways that they actually helped teams? What was their involvement? I like to see that excitement, that energy. And I guess I'm old school. Those handwritten notes at the end after an interview is completed, thanking for the time and then maybe commenting on that one thing that stuck out to them. That goes a long way. That's that attentive to details.
Mhm.
But our doctors, we really do a good job in, I think, kind of helping them and coaching them as far as because we do the hospitals rely on us to do not only the search, but to really, I'd say, qualify the actual physician. And in doing so, there's a lot of questions and a lot of expectations that we establish from the very beginning. So the physician that understands where they want to be helps us help them so that we're not putting them in a position of failure. But somebody that can just come in and be a partner and is willing to work with us, being transparent, being open, um, is really at the beginning what we're looking for when working with physicians.
That's great. I want to point out for the audience the the major thing that you've pointed out throughout that entire answer is you didn't say, college educated, 5 years experience in this. And that's what I feel like the majority of people think that employers today are really prioritizing. And in my experience too is spot on with yours, is it's more about behavior, soft skill, personality. When I was in recruitment, 9 years ago, it was a bit more about hard skill sets, which are the 5 years, a degree, and that seemed to be more cared about then. And now it's kind of shifted to like who you are as a person, how much do you care about XYZ, and are you curious and passionate? And so those soft skills are huge, I feel like. And like you said, from a doctor to an entry level recruiter, salesperson, it's almost like you're looking for very similar traits in someone. It's like who they are to their core, if I've heard that correctly. But I think that's been a big shift that I've noticed from today too versus back then. So what about the future? What do you think? And I'm just leaving you with a really open-ended question. Sorry, you can talk about whatever, but where do you see, maybe it's Weatherby, you, whatever, in 5 to 10 years in terms of like the workplace and culture? What does that look like in your mind?
Yeah. So as far as the industry, the future, the fortunate piece when it comes to healthcare and in the physician world, they're still expected double-digit increase for even next year. We're expected to have at least 10% growth when it comes to the overall demand of physicians and being able to service patients. And with that, it's a benefit for our organization where we can continue to invest into not only our people, but what we want our future teams to look like. So, as I mentioned earlier, we want to continue to attract the best talent, people that actually truly care about making a difference out in this industry. And so we're expected to continue to grow. Um, I cannot imagine, unless, there are some significant cures that are actually going to be implemented here within the next few months or a couple years. I don't see that happening. But what I do foresee changing, and it's been exciting, it's been a challenge for me. You mentioned AI a couple times, how that's making a lot of the processes and almost a lot of the conversations more efficient, a lot of the work more efficient. So not only myself, but I'm also challenging my consultants on adapting, embracing AI. Our organization has invested quite a ton into it. So we're going to have some new systems in place here soon. That's going to one be a benefit to at the end of the day, as I mentioned, is to how can we quickly get a provider out to that community where those patients, where that community actually needs. So just growth would be the theme that I see overall when it comes to the industry. The demand's going to be there for the physicians, growth within the organization. We're going to need more quality individuals that want to make a difference within the team. And uh, I think it's, over the next 2 to 5 years, I'm excited because I feel like in the years past, I kind of almost expected what the next few years were going to be like. But with AI and chat GPT and how those will continue to evolve, I think it's going to be a fun next few years.
Okay. And what about like 10 years out? And when you say the growth for even Weatherby and physicians, my head's either going like, okay, are we going to need a ton more physicians because the population's getting sicker or larger? But I could be totally wrong. Again, I don't know healthcare like whatsoever. But what do you think, or what are doctors going to be? I've seen this on TV too. I want to get your thoughts. Basically, doing surgeries and whatnot from their home on their computer, and they have a little robot in the operating room, and they're going to be working on people. What do you think about that? I mean, that's like future, but I don't
Yeah,
know.
so
Or
I'm not too close to that. I mean, I've seen actually probably that video. I saw a video the other day. I was just talking to my team about on how AI is making things so much more efficient, where if you can visualize getting an x-rays, for example, like a chest x-ray. And if you were to look at it, you have no idea what you're looking at. You just see the skeletal system, you see your lungs, and then a bunch of black areas. But the doctor can point out, oh, it looks like, this person has pneumonia or has developed some cancer cells. Well, that same x-ray that may take a physician, I'm not sure how long, depending on what and how much they're looking at it, but it's going to take some time to probably fully look at and see what are possibly, let's say, for example, cancer cells. AI within seconds will actually create like a heat map on that same x-ray and say, here's where that infection, or here's where the
whoa.
potential situation may come from. So see, and actually, I think that clip that I'm thinking of has gone viral because it's actually a physician saying, and here's how AI is changing my job. And after that happened, he's like, and now I'm going to go apply for a job at McDonald's. Nothing wrong working at McDonald's, but he himself, physicians are seeing how, it's definitely how it's here and how it's going to evolve. Um, I mean, there's just a lot that's actually going on. And when it comes to, great, I'm one that if you're not mentally, physically, and spiritually fit, like, life can be very challenging. So I am always in tune with making sure that my team, my family, myself, that I'm as healthy. And granted, we all make mistakes and things like that, but so hopefully everybody gets healthier, and the need isn't because people are going crazy, but I mean, the population, I think I read a story, or I think you see in the news, there's like a rally cry as far as like having more babies. So in that department, I am on, I guess, the edge of my seat as much as you are to see, yeah, what's going to look like in 10 years. But it's going to be some crazy stuff for sure when you go into a doctor's office. It's not going to probably take hours or weeks to have certain diagnosis. Probably going to be,
It's gonna be quicker. Okay, that is a good point. Yeah, it's so tough to talk about the future with it all. But I'm glad that companies, and it seems like Weatherby is using AI to make your lives easier. I'm really hoping, I've said this in a lot of my podcasts, everyone knows where I stand on this, but I'm really hoping for a 4-day work week for people, for doctors, for
yeah,
everyone. Yeah, that would be cool. So it could be so efficient that we could do 60-hour work weeks in 4 days. But we'll see. I think you have like half the population is like, we're not going to have a job. And then the other is like, oh, we're not going to have to work as hard, but who knows? For the future, do you see people like working, if you had to guess, completely remote? Or do you think it's going to be more back in the office? Maybe people are going to miss that social connection if you had to guess based on, you being in the staffing industry and talking to people all the time.
yeah, so as far as with Weatherby, in my personal belief, I love the hybrid piece. I'm just a people person. I've led many, many teams in my past, and that connection, that physical presence within the team really has been very impactful for not only myself, but I've seen it all across um, all across the industry. For myself, I love to see a component always where there's the hybrid piece, where there's a physical and there's the virtual piece. Now, we have consultants that do a phenomenal job that work fully remote. Some of the things that we have agreed on is that when we have weeks like this week, where it's putting people first week, or a big holiday event, that we'll take care of that travel for them to come into town so that they get to hang out with the team. I would like to just continue. My personal belief is to have that physical connection still. But yeah, I mean, but it works the other way too. And I've led consultants that way, and they will be honest. They miss out too on those pieces when the energy is thriving, and it's that little bit of that motivation you need after lunch coming in, and now you've got to make some calls to get in contact with some physicians. And if you're doing that at home, it can be very difficult. Not that it's impossible, but we have a lot of successful consultants that do it that way. We have a lot of successful consultants that do it the hybrid way. So me personally, since you're asking, I always wanted to have that physical component in place. 5 days a week, no thank you.
Yeah, I'm like 100% on the same page with you. Went from like 60 hours in the office and then to hybrid, and I loved hybrid. Then I went fully remote and I was like, wow, this is a dream. But then after being fully remote for a while, it started to get lonely, and virtual was just didn't fulfill that social need. And then I wanted to go back hybrid. So then we all went back hybrid, and that was like perfect. 2 days in the office too. So maybe it's a staffing person thing.
Awesome.
Because some of them, I've talked to people and they're like, I never want to see a human again. Leave me alone. I want to work remote.
No,
I'm
no,
like,
no.
oh. But we're in sales for a reason, I guess.
Exactly.
um, anything about the past, current, future that you wanted to share that maybe I didn't ask you directly? Anything you want to give the audience or leave them with? Anything else you want to talk about that I didn't maybe cover that you feel is important?
As far as with healthcare in general, it's been for me, it's been an amazing opportunity to kind of see what's behind the curtain. I didn't want to go to school to be a physician. I've always respected the physicians, with their aspirations and what they wanted to do. I mean, it's always inspiring when I get on a phone call with a physician where they're my age. I'm 43, and they're just now getting started in a lot of cases in working in their industry because they've been going to school for so long to become very and highly specialized. So that's just awesome for me to see someone's talent, to see someone's drive and motivation. So if anybody's out there that's thinking about getting into the healthcare staffing, specifically the sales side of things, I'll tell you, it's such a rewarding opportunity. It really, for me, kind of connected the dots. I mean, for the longest time now, even when I go in for a checkup, I it's a different shift or a different approach I have. I understand kind of
Yeah.
what's going on. It's funny too because a lot of times the doctors will ask something personal about me. What do I do for work? That's always a fun question. I
Yeah.
say, oh, I've got your phone call as of this morning. So those are
Yeah.
always fun. But it's an awesome opportunity. But it is because it's so demanding and healthcare doesn't sleep and doesn't shut off at 5 p.m. on a Friday. That's also what we have a responsibility to do. That, if our doctors are stuck in an airport heading to Bozeman, Montana in Florida, and it's 11:30 at night and their flight's canceled and now all their travel is up in the air. We're that consultant that doctor's going to call. I always say we're kind of like that sports agent to that high performing athlete throughout their career, that we're always keeping our eyes and ears out for them, looking out for their best interests. So that, hey, look, that this person will want to share their experience with others so that we can continue to help more. So it's a very positive, rewarding experience. And if anyone's interested in learning more and hearing more about it, I'm sure you'll share my information. But we are, it's definitely an exciting opportunity. I could continue to talk more on maybe a different podcast. Because I know,
Cool. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, super rewarding placing people, especially a physician. They're literally out there saving lives. And so I can imagine that's even more rewarding than, you know, placing anyone else. As the essential workers, now that we remembered that word.
yes, yeah.
Well, we end the podcast with two questions about you.
All
What is
right.
your favorite resume database, and what is your favorite song right now?
Ooh, good question. So database. I said this earlier, but it's been like my bread and butter. But LinkedIn, I really do feel that when I can look at someone's attributes, maybe work experience, and kind of hear them with their summary, like for me, that's appealing. And I want to message them and hop on a phone call with them. I'm not one to shy away from picking up the phone and calling some random person based off of information that I've come across. I do think LinkedIn is something that's going to continue to grow. So I just find myself probably more so in that environment, connecting with different professionals, passing my information along. So hopefully my information can continue to be passed along. But yeah, LinkedIn is where I'd say if people are listening and they don't have a profile or they're not active, to please do so.
Yeah.
And I've trained my team multiple times. We actually have a specific LinkedIn trainer within our organization. It's just that valuable. And
Wow.
favorite song, actually, I kid you not, probably have heard this song 50 times in the last week, just because
Oh,
it's like so catchy now. I caught it on my Spotify mix of Teddy Swims, but the singer is Connor Price, and the song is Too Easy. So Connor Price, and the
it's too
song is Too
easy.
Easy.
Why does he sound familiar? I definitely haven't heard it though, but I don't know why he's sounding familiar. I'm gonna listen to that one when we hang up here.
It's a little bit of like a hip hop type chill vibe type music. I'm more of a reggae, revolution, dirty heads type guy, but this one kind of almost has it's actually like a positive song. So if you like listen to the lyrics too, it's yeah, it's a pretty good song. It gets you moving
Cool.
for sure.
I like that. I like that music too. So I'm gonna have to. I'll probably like that one. Cool. Well, I hope you guys listening got some good information today. Learned something maybe about yourself and have an idea of where it's headed. It's not all doom and gloom like sometimes social media leans it to be. So anyway, thanks for listening. If you have any questions for Kevin or myself, just put them in the comments. Please like, subscribe, and reach out to Kevin, especially if you're interested in joining healthcare staffing. I actually have a couple friends from high school that joined right out of college, and I think they're both still there and loving it. So y'all have really good longevity for staffing that I've noticed online and through my friends. But Anyway, if you have questions about it too, reach out to Kevin if you're interested in that role. And then he will guide you where to go from there. Thank you.